Today, the US elections is what we've all been waiting for quite some time now. Mike Goodwin is alongside me, as is Mike Buckley. Those two gents there, I've got to say, I ran out of time with them, but what I wanted to ask them, because that was a great reflection of what is taking place in America right now. They are so divided. They are so opposed to each other. I wonder, how does the country come together off the back of this? Whoever wins, because, you know, people, places are getting boarded up now. So businesses, so on and so forth, are boarding up their facilities, awaiting the outcome. Because people are worried about rioting in the streets. I
think everybody around the world watching this election is worried for that reason. And I think we all have competing interpretations of where the main threat to democracy is coming from. I mean, Democrats will tell you Trump is basically Hitler reincarnate. It's the return of fascism. But, of course, Republicans, as you heard there in that exchange, would point out that, you know, the party that has prosecuted and persecuted the former president consistently since the last election, that staged a coup against their own president, Joe Biden, that lied to the country by saying Joe Biden was entirely fit for public office, is now saying that the Republicans are the threat to democracy. I think there's an irony in that. But there is a glimmer of hope for America here, too, which is that I think this election is going to give us evidence that America is becoming less polarised. I think African Americans will vote for Trump in bigger numbers than at any election for the Republicans, at any election in recent history. I think Hispanic, Latino voters will vote for Trump at bigger numbers than we've seen previously. So this is what people in my world call, brace yourself, they call it racial depolarization. So basically, politics in America is becoming less polarized over time as minorities move towards the Republicans, and that's shaking things up in a way that we haven't seen before. So that's a little glimmer of hope, if you like, for American democracy.
Mike?
Well, I mean, I think there is a glimmer of hope for American democracy, and that's if Kamala Harris wins, quite frankly. I mean, I've heard Trump say multiple times, vote this time, you'll never need to vote again, don't worry about it. So Pablo Ohano, on that interview, was entirely right in saying that Donald Trump has been very, very clear about the fact that what he's saying, he's also said, I will be a dictator on day one. You know, Trump has many, many times. I mean, if you take him at his word, and there's no reason for us not to take him at his word, he will end American democracy or enact changes to it so that it is perpetual Trump.
Is it?
Who knows if it will happen?
Well, if he was going to...
The American president has huge power. He has been set out his programme and he has been clear on that.
If what you're saying is you reckon he's going to get elected, is literally going to stop people ever being able to vote again, why wouldn't he have done that last time? It's just, I shouldn't laugh because it's a serious matter, but I find it so absurd that people would think that.
It is a serious matter. I mean, that was 4 years ago. I mean, you saw how he acted when he lost last time. We denied that he lost. Then he instigated a violent rebellion against the Capitol building.
Hang on, Mike. One second.
He did. I mean, we all saw it happen live on TV. Right in the middle of the pandemic.
And how did he instigate that? Because I heard him many times saying to people, don't be violent,
He and his outriders instigated it in huge ways. I mean, as we also know, I mean, as Pablo said, I mean, he said that, you know, nobody who worked for Trump is supporting him last time. The other guy then said, well, I was working with him last time. I mean, fine. But the senior people who were working with him last time have all come out and said, this guy is either a fascist or he shouldn't be president, or, you know, they've basically said...
He was calling him pretty much Hitler and Nazis the other day. It's just laughable.
These people who know him and who are concerned about the future of their country, and to downplay the significance of that, it's not taking it seriously.
Mike, does it not concern you at all that senior Democrats lied en masse to America about the health and fitness of Joe Biden for public office? Does it not concern you at all that they did that for months, knowing full well the president was not fit for public office, and now are saying they want to change the rules of the game to pack the Supreme Court, to extend the number of judges in the Supreme Court so that they can have more Democrat-friendly decisions? Now, imagine
Given
for a second,
Trump
Mike...
stacked the Supreme Court last time around, I think that's perfectly reasonable.
Right, should we do Politics 101? Dominic,
If you like, why not?
So Donald Trump was appointing judges that he had the right to appoint as an incumbent president, because when judges die, you're allowed to replace them. What the Democrats are suggesting is that they've changed the entire rules of the game by extending the number of judges in the Supreme Court. Can you
when
imagine
Barack
if a
Obama was
Republican did
president,
that?
Republicans refused to endorse his candidate, and so there was a vacancy when Trump came in.
So we're OK to lie to the country about the health of Joe Biden? That doesn't bother you at all?
It's perfectly reasonable for the Democrats to support their leader.
Does it not bother you at all that they staged a coup to replace Joe Biden?
He didn't stage a coup. He resigned because he recognised that...
After telling us he was fine?
He recognised that... Of course, leaders are going to tell you they're fine until they decide otherwise. That's simply what leaders are. That's
you don't
what
think
leaders
there's
do.
anything fishy about that?
Of course I don't. It's perfectly normal.
Right.
And he then came to the conclusion himself that he should not stand, and he resigned. And we're now where we are. And Kamala Harris is going to be president. I sincerely hope, which is a wonderful thing.
Do you not understand then why tens of millions of Americans...
you compare this to the UK. We've all seen loads of Tories, for example, coming out and saying Liz Truss is great until she goes, or Boris Johnson's great until he goes, or Rishi Sunak's great until he goes. After the event, they all come out and admit they were, a nightmare.
So I think what the divide is revealing is where you really feel the main threat to democracy is coming from. And I was quite influenced by
I think it's with the guy who says he's going to get rid of it.
I was quite struck by an essay by Michael Gurry, who said fundamentally what this election is about is between two forces in American life. One that wants to take control away from people, that wants to impose a top-down regime of clampdowns on free speech and regulation, like we've seen Labour activists and allies say they want to, quote-unquote, kill Elon Musk's Twitter, working in alliance with the Democrats, versus those who actually want to say, no, we're not going to be controlled by these authoritarian leftists who want to control free speech, free expression and every aspect of our lives. I mean, it's quite clear what the game plan is. Shut down the public square, shut down social media and stigmatise views that people on the left don't like. We see it with Keir Starmer in his Labour government. We'll see it with Kamala Harris and the Democrats. The threat to democracy, to the demos, to liberty, actually, I would argue, is coming more from the left today than it is from the right.
Well,
So
you're going to
you
want to
think-
respond to that, Mike, so you'll have to just hold that thought, because
None of that was true, by the way, viewers.
Well, that's all right. He reckons he's making it all up, so we'll have this out
we
after
see it
the
in the
break.
documents. We see-
Right, before the break, you were just saying that Matt was making a load of stuff up about what he was saying. Explain.
Well, I mean, if you missed what Matt was saying before the break, if I can summarise, correct me if I'm wrong in what you were saying that the Democrats and Harris are more of a threat to democracy than Trump. My response to that is surely the threat to democracy, being as democracy is based on the ability to vote, and Trump is saying, vote this time, we never need to bother voting again because I'll make that impossible. The threat to democracy comes from Trump and the Republicans. It's set out in detail if you want to read a long document called Project 2025, which is Trump's plan for the presidency,
Well,
which would be a horror if it were going to be implemented here. It would be a horror if it was going to be implemented in the States. It's heavily linked to Trump and the Trump campaign. Why they've published it, I don't know. It seems utterly mad to me. I would keep an evil plan secret if I was an evil dictator, but I'm not, so that's all right.
So just for viewers who might have just tuned in, what I pointed out is it's ironic that the party that has prosecuted and persecuted a former president, that is trying to change the rules for the Supreme Court, that has basically been catastrophising endlessly about fascism and the far right in order to clamp down on free speech, and has staged a coup against its own former leader, Joe Biden, is now telling us that the main threat to democracy is coming from the other side.
No one staged a coup against Joe Biden. He resigned in broad daylight in front of all of us a few months ago.
The thing is, everybody can see it. Everybody can see it.
Doubtless the GB News viewers are fully aware of that.
I tell you what viewers are thinking. I guarantee what viewers will be thinking and feeling right now. They'll be thinking there's something similar going on here between Kamala Harris and the Democrats and Keir Starmer in the aftermath of the protests in the summer, which is that the left is so intolerant of anybody who expresses a different view about how society should work, like Trump or like ordinary people up and down this country, that their instinctive reflex is not to preserve the public square, to allow a flourishing of views. It's to shut down free speech and free expression.
I can't imagine many people watching this who are fully aware of how violent those riots were in the summer think anything other than well of the government for arresting those people and making sure that they're prosecuted.
I didn't hear the left shouting down the BLM protests and the riots that destroyed Portland.
I'm sorry?
The BLM riots, the Black Lives Matter protests.
You mean Portland in the States?
Yeah, why weren't they calling out those riots and protests?
That isn't here, for one thing.
But why? You just talked about January 6th. I'm asking you, where was the left calling out Antifa?
Nobody is in favour of violent protests of any kind. Certainly I'm not.
I didn't hear Keir Starmer say anything. Keir Starmer took a knee for BLM. I didn't hear him calling out the Antifa rights.
Taking a knee for BLM is not the same as supporting violent rights in the States.
He did take a knee after the BLM protesters had injured nearly 30 British police officers.
That isn't saying that he stands with that. It's saying that he stands with black people and the rights and the respect.
So he accepted they had legitimate grievances, I guess, because in the aftermath of the protests in the summer, he seemed completely incapable.
You're conflating a whole range of scenarios.
No, I'm saying there are double standards on the left, and I'm calling out the double standards.
There are not double standards on the left. To say that black people have right to live honourable lives and safe lives in our society, it's perfectly reasonable to take a knee for that as well. That is not to support violent activity. That is not to support the violence of the January 6th riots, which were horrendous and were instigated by Trump. And that is not to say that we shouldn't support democracy in all ways, shape, and form. But it is to say that we should not support a man who's saying, vote for me this election, you'll never need to vote again. And that's a blatant way of saying, I'm going to end American democracy.
Right.
But I can't. I mean, I said this to you.
It's not even slightly complicated.
No, it's not complicated, and people are not idiotic, so they understand what you're saying, but nobody with a scintilla of common sense would believe that to be true or going to happen.
So why on earth is he saying it, for one thing, and why so many of his close advisors from the last time he was in power said, you need to take this seriously, don't let him anywhere near power?
When has he said, I'm going to end democracy and prevent people ever being able to vote again?
He has said it out loud many times, as Pablo and Hannah said
in the
earlier
aftermath
on.
of the last election, he conceded and left office.
And instigated a violent riot and just continually refused even to this day. He refuses even to this day to admit that he lost the last election.
Let me tell you now, though, right, because there'll be people watching this. I know some of my viewers at home, I speak to you every day, and you will be shouting at your screens that there's a few people out and about that have Trump derangement syndrome, that no matter what goes on, you just have this kind of tunnel vision about how awful Donald Trump will be. Let me just quickly ask you this. One of my viewers, Jude, said, Michelle, why are you all talking about the American election? What's that got to do with us in the UK? How will it impact us here?
Well, it's going to have an enormous influence on geopolitics. I mean, let's imagine for a second that Donald Trump were elected. You're going to have a fundamentally different view from the US on the war in Ukraine. There will almost certainly be a push to resolve that quickly. There'll be a much stronger line in supporting Israel in the Middle East. The dynamics of the Middle East will change. Trump will rightly bring a lot more pressure to bear on the European Union and European leaders to pay their share when it comes to defence spending. He'll point out, Michelle and Jude, the hypocrisy of politicians in Germany and elsewhere pursuing net zero policies that are making us more reliant on the likes of China, Russia and autocracies around the world. And he will call out, actually, a lot of the double standards that are applying in other Western nations. Now, people on the left might not like a lot of that, but they won't at the same time give us answers to how does the war in Ukraine end? How do we resolve the Middle East? Why are we still becoming so dependent on China and Russia, or importing energy from even places like North Korea and Afghanistan while pursuing net zero? So Trump calls a lot of that out. I think it will have an enormous impact, actually. Kamala Harris, sort of more of the same, just more of the same bland status quo, which resulted in disaster in Afghanistan. That was an embarrassing bailout from the US. It undermined the national security in the Western alliance. They have no real solution to the war in Ukraine, very clearly. They're not really talking about fixing the southern border in any meaningful way, so the illegal migration crisis, global crisis, will continue. I don't see any change from the status quo with Harris.
Mike?
This is a very important election, of course, for the people of America. It's a very important election for us. When it comes to defence and security, Trump's been very clear that he would stop support of Ukraine. Russia is a dictatorship. They've invaded the European democracy. The rest of us, America and us at the moment in Europe, are supporting Ukraine, not as much as we should, but we are supporting Ukraine, and that is the only reason they're able to defend themselves. They are defending themselves. They're also defending us. If Trump gets in, that will, from what he said, end almost overnight. That puts all of us in danger from Russia, and without Americans backing, I mean, the Europeans, even with our security apparatus in the UK and the French as well, and indeed Germany and others, we would struggle to have what it takes to oppose Russian aggression, is the truth of the matter. So all of us would be less safe. When it comes to the economy, Trump's been clear he'd raise tariffs, which means that it would be more expensive for not just China, but also the UK as well, to export stuff to America. That would have an impact on our economy. That would make all of our countries poorer. And it would probably start a trade war with China in which we would get stuck in the middle because we're quite a small country and a small economy. Of course, as we've already discussed, he would do what he could, which would be a lot, to end American democracy. That would make things much more difficult. We would live in a more unstable world.
How are you going to cope if he wins?
I think we will all find it very, very difficult. I mean, I'm very, very glad that we live in the UK now happily under a stable government that is doing good things to change our country for the better. There are lots of things that would continue. I think we would have to work more closely with our European allies in lots of ways and find other alliances around the world, because Trump would certainly not be a stable or a secure ally.
Start a trade war with China is an interesting one. Trump brought in all the tariffs in 2016, and then Joe Biden and Kamala Harris kept them. So it's not as if Trump's starting a trade war. The Democrats kept them. And by the way, Democrats making the world a safer place. Well, that's interesting. I mean, Iran, the Middle East, Afghanistan.
I mean,
people are looking around the world and
agree.
saying what autocracies have realised is American leadership is weak.
I certainly don't agree with everything that Biden has done, particularly over Israel and Gaza, by any stretch of the imagination, and I hope that Harris will be more robust on that. But certainly he has done what he can on Ukraine.